Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. This presentation is geared to both people who teach construction management and people who research virtual reality. Welcome, I am Dr. Diane Guevara, an assistant professor of interior design.
And I'm Adam Bogedain, instructor of construction management, and both of us are visiting from Eastern Michigan University.
We are presenting today Construction Management Safety Training, Students' Perception of Spatial Presence, and we're here at the DII 2022 8th International Conference. Due to time constraints today, we will present a brief overview. However, our full paper will be available for you to read in the conference proceedings. Before we dive into the details, how did we get here today? My research started both as a master's student and then a doctoral student, and also as an instructor, when I introduced virtual reality into my teaching and my classroom for interior design students at the university level. They used it as a self-critique tool for their own designs. This research led to a published index for measuring spatial presence, perceived spatial presence, while someone is in virtual reality. This then led to a fellowship studying VR spatial presence. And it was during that makeshift time of where our curriculum went to online during the COVID-19 shutdown.
My research background is implementing project-based learning to construction management. I use the flipped classroom in my project-based learning classes and have begun to incorporate VR to increase student engagement. I also have multiple papers that are near completion on the demand for educational technology and instructional design programs in higher education, student preferences of virtual reality inclusion in construction and engineering education, and challenges in educational digital globalization. Our research problem is the construction industry has the highest number of workplace fatalities. The ACCE requires construction management instructors to incorporate construction safety training into the curriculum.
So what does the existing scholarly literature say? Though there is research comparing VR use in construction management safety training, there's a gap in measuring human factors. And one such human factor is spatial presence, and this is while experiencing VR.
Our research question is, if a construction safety instructor were to develop a virtual reality ladder safety training, how would the student's spatial presence compare while within the instructor developed training versus the construction management ladder safety training that was mass produced?
To understand, we need to look at the theoretical framework behind this, how we're going to measure this. We will examine this through the lens of the model of spatial presence. And spatial presence is defined by Worth et al. As the user consciously experiencing the sensation of presence based on a cognitive feeling and an unconscious process. So simply put, how present do you feel? And we're applying it to how present do you feel while in a virtual environment. Next, let's take a look at how we will measure this. Guevara et al. Developed the Measurements, Effects, Conditions, Spatial Presence Questionnaire, and it includes 3 sub-variables that you see here. Now, I'm showing you 3 example questions from that questionnaire, though there are 24 questions in it. So just to give you an idea, one of the questions in it is, I was able to make a good estimate of the size of the presented space. So this is a question that the participants would answer from strongly agree to strongly disagree after experiencing the media such as virtual reality. The second example question is, I felt like the objects in the presentation surrounded me. And the third sample is, I had the impression that I could be active in the environment of the presentation. So lastly, the researchers then can take the data and apply the VRSPI, which is the Virtual Reality Spatial Presence Index, developed by myself and 2 other researchers, Delaski, Smith, and Asher. This was an index developed by our team that can rate the user's perception of spatial presence while experiencing VR on a 5-point scale from very strong to very weak, which you can see at the red arrow.
Next, let's take a look at the trainings we are comparing. Pixo is a company that develops VR training for all disciplines with anything ranging from meditation to construction, engineering, utilities, and gas leaks. Pixo does have a ladder safety training that we secured a license for in order to have my construction management students experience it. After experiencing the Pixo training, my students will then complete a questionnaire that Diane mentioned in a previous slide, the Measurement, Effects, Conditions, Spatial Presence Questionnaire by Guevara A. This MECSPQ questionnaire is meant to be completed immediately after the exposure of the media, such as VR. Next, the students will experience the construction ladder safety training developed by me. Again, the students will complete the same questionnaire. After the data collection, Diane will apply the VRSPI Virtual Reality Spatial Presence Index on a 5-point scale from very strong to very weak. The data will then finally be collected next month and will be disseminated in a scholarly journal.
So in conclusion, our hypothesis is that when using VR, virtual reality, to disseminate training, a difference can be found in the student's spatial presence when the training is developed by the instructor who created the content versus being developed by a company that's not familiar with the content and instead pulls the content from a business partner, such as the example with Pixo. So next we will show you an example of the instructor developed training. And here you can see the participant would have a virtual reality headset on, but can view 360 degrees around and hover over the hotspot with the information about the ladder safety training. And then next, here is the example of Pixo ladder safety training. Of course, again, this participant would have a VR headset on. So I will be available online to answer your questions, and we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.